Madam President, it's January. It's cold outside. In fact, it's snowing outside here in Washington, D.C. today and tomorrow. It's late January, which means what it has meant for the last 5 decades. Pro-life Americans will gather by the hundreds of thousands in Washington, D.C., and will converge on this city to say we think every child is valuable. Now, I have to tell you, every march that I've been to, and I've been to a lot, they're all cold. They don't all have snow. This one will. But I bet it won't dampen the spirits for a lot of students and leaders and moms and dads, little ones that'll come, just to be able to say, hey, we're an American, and we think life is valuable. We think children are precious. We think this is an important issue. Now, we haven't always had a March for Life. We've had one for 50 years, actually. But it's interestingly enough, when Nellie Gray and some other pro-life leaders organized the March for Life starting after 1973, after the Roe v. Wade decision, they were recognizing an anomaly in American law, because our nation's been a nation almost 250 years, but abortion was only mandated in every state and every place just during that short time period under Roe v. Wade. For the other 2 centuries of our nation, this issue about the value of life was decided in every state and among the people. That's what's occurred again. We still have abortion in America. It's happening all over the country. But individuals are rising up and saying our state, our leaders, and even this Congress needs to have a conversation about when is a child, and when does a child become valuable in our culture, and when is a child disposable in our culture, and which child can be disposed of, and which child is celebrated. I love this side-by-side picture here, and I don't know if you can really see it, but this is an ultrasound that's actually happening in the womb of this baby in this position with arms up over her head, and then a baby sleeps like that. In fact, both of my daughters, they often slept like that. We called them touchdown position on that when their hands were raised up over their head. But it's kind of funny for me to be able to see this picture and to be able to see an ultrasound of this child in the womb sleeping just like the same way they would later sleep in the crib. You know why? Because there's no difference between these 2 babies. That's a baby then, that's a baby then. The only difference is time. The only difference between myself right now and myself 9 months ago was time, 9 months of time. The only difference between this child in the womb and that child laying in a crib is just a little bit of time. And there are literally millions of Americans that have this very simple perspective, that we should, as the march says this year, we should march with every woman for every child. That we should stand up for those individuals and to be able to honor those families. We march in support of pregnancy resource centers. Those folks who are walking with women through very difficult decisions and through very hard moments. There was a recent study that was done on pregnancy resource centers, done just in 2022, that found that $359 million were donated to individuals through pregnancy resource centers all over the country. Those are diapers and wipes, those are baby formula, that's car seats, that's free ultrasounds, that's free pregnancy tests, that's after abortion support, and sometimes it's strollers and clothes. The vast majority of those individuals that work in these pregnancy resource centers are heroes. They're volunteers that give their time. They've got full-time jobs or tasks or families in other places, but they value every single child, even the children they don't know enough, that they would donate their time and their money and their effort just to be able to say that child is just as valuable as that child. And then in America, we shouldn't pick and choose which child is precious and which child is disposable. We should just say they all are. This administration's been exceptionally aggressive on taking on this issue of life, pushing back from the very beginning. For instance, there's a nurse that was in the process of dealing with her employer because this nurse had informed the hospital that she worked with that she was personally opposed to abortion. morally, personally opposed to abortion. And she was told, you won't have to participate in abortion. You have a conscience right protection that's under the United States law that individuals cannot be compelled to have an abortion. So she worked at this hospital until one day she had a doctor and a nurse that actually compelled her to participate in an abortion or she would lose her job. She was not allowed to be able to have her conscience without losing her job. Well, that was in the course of litigation, but in the earliest days of the Biden administration, that litigation was just dismissed, saying to her, we understand it's federal law that you should have conscience protections, but we don't agree with your opinion, and so you don't get conscience protections. Only people we agree with. That's wrong. In my state, funding from this administration was cut off in my state for AIDS testing, for screenings, for breast cancer evaluations. That money was federal dollars allocated in my state to help in healthcare in rural communities. That money was cut off by this administration. You want to know why? Because our state would not promote abortion. And the determination was made, you won't get federal assistance for AIDS testing or for breast cancer screening or for assistance in your county health departments. We're going to cut your funds off for that if your state chooses not to promote abortion. And our state stepped up and said, we believe every child is valuable, both of those kids. And we'll find a way to do it on our own. But in the meantime, this administration is cutting off funds for AIDS testing because they don't like people in our state, our opinion about the value of life. This administration has just proposed to cut off temporary assistance for needy families to pro-life centers. As I mentioned before, some of these pregnancy resource centers give out food, clothing, assistance. They've been a part of the TANF program for years and years and years. But this administration has proposed to be able to cut them off, to say, if you assist families but also don't promote abortion, you can't actually assist families. You're not one of us. Literally telling to those Americans, you don't agree with the administration, so you don't count because you're actually trying to protect life. We won't help you do that. This administration is currently trying to use the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act to force doctors to provide abortions, even though that law that they're using specifically and explicitly protects pregnant moms and unborn children. But they're currently trying to be able to twist it the other way. This administration is currently fighting an issue on chemical abortions. Chemical abortions that have been around for years. A 2-drug cocktail that the first drug actually disconnects the child from the connection in the womb and starves them. The second pill causes that delivery, causes the contraction of the uterus, and they have an abortion at home, a do-it-yourself kit for at home. That for years has been a very specific issue, only a certain specific time period that you could actually use that drug cocktail, knowing that if the child was just a few weeks older, it causes a real danger to the mom. Or if this was an ectopic pregnancy, it could actually take the life of that mom. Or if the mom has the wrong blood type, it could actually cause the mom not to be able to have children in the future. So in the past, a physician would have to connect with that mom before they would get this drug cocktail. This administration has continued to fight to say, no, they don't need to see a physician. They can just get it mailed to them. And in a situation with an ectopic pregnancy, literally the side effects from having the do-it-yourself abortion at home may look similar to the side effects of an ectopic pregnancy, but there's no way to know unless you get that ultrasound, and they'll never know. Listen, I'm fully aware this administration's aggressive about trying to provide more abortions in the country. But why would they put women's lives at risk to be able to make it more convenient to be able to have an abortion? It's January. So we're talking about this issue of abortion because the March for Life is happening. But there are literally millions of Americans all around the country that they're going to continue to be able to talk about this issue of life in every way that they can. because they look at these two children literally a few weeks apart and they think both of them are valuable. And I don't think that's a radical concept. We live in a culture in America that is committed to tolerance, acceptance, and diversity, but it seems to be so except for every area except for that child. That child doesn't get to have tolerance, acceptance, and be welcomed into a culture. That child is sometimes determined to be disposable. And I want to say to the millions of Americans that see both these kids and both think they're valuable, continue to be able to love people, to be able to walk alongside those moms, to be able to encourage in every way that you can. Because as a culture, as we keep talking about this issue, more and more people will look at these two pictures and will say, you're right, they both look like children to me. Why don't we treat them equal? That's what we should be all about as a country, and that's why we march in every cold January. That I yield the floor.